At the age of 62, after 4 decades of hard work, I stood on the precipice of the future I had dreamed of for so long. I had sold my antique business for $45 million. For me, this was not just a sale. It was the culmination of a lifetime of sacrifice, early mornings, late nights, weekends spent at estate sales, and long hours spent restoring and cataloging every item. My business was my baby, the very thing I had poured my heart and soul into. What started in 1984 with just $2,000 in my pocket and a small storefront in Charleston had transformed into a flourishing business, cherished by collectors and clients alike. But I had reached the point where my body could no longer bear the constant strain of lifting heavy furniture, squinting at faded signatures, and running the intricate details of the business. The buyers, a luxury retail conglomerate from New York, had pursued me for years, but I had held firm. This was my legacy, and I wasn't sure I was ready to let go. Yet, as I entered my early 60s, the idea of taking a step back, finally relaxing, and enjoying the fruits of my labor was more tempting than ever. It was time to sell, to rest, to travel, to live. My husband Robert and I had sacrificed so much over the years, me managing the business, him working tirelessly as a partner at his accounting firm. We had dreamed of taking that long-awaited vacation in Tuscany, of sailing through the Greek islands, of paying off our daughter Christina's medical school debt, and setting up trust funds for our grandchildren. All those dreams, finally within our grasp. It was a Tuesday morning when the call came through. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, delivered the news that would change everything. Mrs. Miller, the wire transfer is cleared. $45 million is now in your account. I had to sit down. My hands trembled as I processed the numbers, my mind racing with possibilities. $45 million. The dream was real. I couldn't wait to share the news with Robert, to see the joy and relief in his eyes, to finally be able to share this success we had worked so hard to achieve. I grabbed my purse, tucking the folder with all the sale documents inside. I wanted Robert to see everything, to understand the magnitude of this moment. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the life we had built together. Robert worked downtown at Henderson and Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm. I knew he would be at his office by now. I could hardly wait until he got home that evening to share the news. This was too big, too important. We had earned this moment together. The drive to his office took just under 25 minutes, but the anticipation made it feel like an eternity. I arrived at his office building, a glass and steel structure in the heart of the city. The receptionist, Ashley, greeted me with a friendly smile. I hadn't seen her much, but I remembered her from the company Christmas party. She seemed surprised to see me, but I couldn't wait to share my good news. Mrs. Miller, what a lovely surprise. Are you here to see Mr. Miller? She asked. Yes, I am. I have wonderful news. Is he available? I said, unable to contain my excitement. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering briefly across the computer screen. He's in his office. Let me buzz him. No need to bother him, I said, already walking toward the hallway. I'll surprise him. I felt my heart race as I approached the elevator, my pulse quickening with every step. This moment was going to be perfect. I would walk into that office, tell Robert the news, and we would start planning our new life together. When the elevator dinged and the doors opened, I stepped out, turning left and heading toward his office. I counted the doors along the hallway, my excitement growing with each step. Finally, I reached the third door on the right, the brass nameplate reading Robert Miller, CPA. I smiled to myself and turned the handle, but before I could open the door, I heard something that made my heart stop. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Light, intimate, playful, and far too close to Robert's voice. I froze. The words that followed were even worse. You're terrible, the woman said, her voice laced with affection. Am I? Robert's voice responded, sounding lower than usual, almost a purr. You didn't seem to think so an hour ago. An hour ago? My mind was racing. The sound of the words, the tone, the familiarity, they all hit me like a punch to the stomach. My hand gripped the door handle tighter as I tried to steady my breathing. This wasn't how I had imagined this moment. I should have turned around. I should have walked away and taken some time to process what I had just overheard. But I didn't. Instead, I opened the door. And there they were. Robert stood by the window, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking far too relaxed. Next to him, standing far too close, was Melissa Crane. I knew her well. She was the firm's marketing director, always impeccably dressed, the kind of woman who commanded attention in a room. They were standing close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, and the space between them felt intimate. My stomach turned as I took it all in. Their eyes snapped to mine the moment I entered. Robert's face drained of color. "Dorothy, what are you? I didn't know you were coming." Melissa, startled, took a small step back, but not far enough. Not nearly far enough. "I wanted to surprise you," I said, my voice sounding distant, almost robotic. I held up the folder with the sale documents, a desperate attempt to cling to some semblance of normalcy. "I have news." Robert's eyes flickered to Melissa, and then back to me. He stammered, "We were just reviewing the quarterly projections." I glanced around the office, confusion mixing with a growing sense of disbelief. No laptops, no papers. Just 2 coffee cups sitting side by side on the table. Projections? I repeated the word quietly, almost mockingly. The folder in my purse felt like it was burning a hole through the leather. I tried to stay composed, but everything inside me was unraveling. "How long, Robert?" I asked, my voice shaking, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "How long?" he repeated, clearly caught off guard. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my hands gripping the edge of the desk, feeling the cold metal beneath my fingertips. 3 years, Robert muttered, his voice barely audible. 3 years. My mind struggled to process the betrayal, but the numbers seemed to echo in my head. Our daughter's wedding. The birth of our youngest grandchild. My mother's funeral. These were all moments I had shared with Robert, moments that now seemed tainted. "I'm sorry," Robert whispered, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and regret. "Sorry?" The word rang hollow in my ears. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I should scream, cry, or walk away. Instead, I said the only thing that mattered at that moment. "I sold the business," I said quietly, watching his face change as the weight of my words sank in. He blinked, confused. "What?" "The antique shop," I repeated, my voice steadier now. "I accepted the offer. The money cleared this morning. That's why I came to tell you." I watched him carefully. His surprise slowly morphed into something else. Something calculating. "How much?" he asked, his eyes narrowing, his voice barely a whisper. $45 million, I said, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. His eyes widened, the greed flashing there before he could hide it. "That's incredible," he said, as if the money was the only thing that mattered. But I wasn't finished. "We should talk about this, Robert. It's our money. It belongs to both of us." His expression faltered. "Yes, of course. We'll talk about it." "But I—" "No," I interrupted. "Not here. Not now." I could feel the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me, the realization that everything had just changed. "I need time. I need to process this." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the office, my world shattering with every step I took. I didn't look back as I walked down the hallway, past the receptionist's desk, past Ashley, whose face was a mix of confusion and pity. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the office following me, but I didn't care. I was numb. My hands were shaking as I clutched the folder with the sale documents, but I could barely feel its weight anymore. I pushed open the door to the elevator and stepped inside, the cool metal walls offering no comfort as the doors slid shut. I pressed the button for the ground floor, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about everything I had just learned about Robert, about Melissa, about the life we had built together. 3 years. 3 years of lies. It was a betrayal I never could have prepared for, a betrayal that would change everything. The elevator stopped with a soft chime, and I stepped out into the lobby, walking toward the exit without a word to anyone. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing anyone's face right now, especially Robert's. He had looked at me with those wide eyes when I mentioned the sale. He hadn't been surprised by my news, not really. No, he had been calculating. All he could think about was the money. When I reached my car, I sat for a long time without moving. I stared out the windshield, my thoughts a blur. What was I supposed to do now? I had sold the business. I had the money, but none of that mattered anymore. I could already hear Robert's voice in my head, the way he had spoken so casually about how much money we had made, how much he was going to help me manage it. He didn't care about the effort I had put into building that business. He didn't care about the years I had spent building a legacy. All he cared about was what he could get out of it. I had never felt more alone. After what felt like hours, I finally started the car and drove to my lawyer's office. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the realization settling in with every mile I drove. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. Furious at Robert for his lies, at myself for not seeing it sooner. But mostly, I was angry at the fact that I had spent 37 years of my life with a man who had never really seen me, not for who I was, not for what I had built. Bernard Chun, my lawyer, had always been sharp, always been someone I trusted. He'd helped me navigate the complexities of running a business and had been there when I'd signed the papers that officially separated my business from our marital assets years ago. If anyone would understand what I needed right now, it was him. When I walked into his office, Bernard looked up in surprise. "Dorothy? I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I closed the door behind me and took a seat across from him. "Not even close," I replied. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Bernard studied me for a moment before leaning back in his chair, giving me his full attention. "Of course. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The business, when I started it, when I built it, it was all mine. I started with my own money, kept it separate from our marital assets. Over the years, Robert never had any official stake in it. But now, with the sale of the business, I need to know legally whose money is it? Robert's? Or mine? Bernard leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the desk as he thought for a moment. South Carolina is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. Given the circumstances, it seems clear that your business would be considered separate property. You started it with your own funds before the marriage, and you kept it separate throughout your marriage. Legally, Robert would have a difficult time claiming any portion of it in a divorce. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "That's what I needed to hear," I said quietly. "But what if there's more to it? What if Robert tries to claim it anyway? Or if he tries to claim a part of the proceeds?" Bernard's gaze sharpened. "Are you thinking about divorce?" The word hit me like a punch. Divorce. I had never imagined it. Even after all the years of frustration, of dealing with Robert's work obsession, his emotional distance, and now this. But everything had changed now. "Yes," I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "I'm thinking about it." Bernard leaned back in his chair, considering my words carefully. "If you decide to go through with it, Dorothy, I need to be clear with you. These things are never simple. Robert could argue that his emotional support, his role in your life, helped make the business a success. It's a stretch, but he could make that claim. And, of course, if there's any financial commingling, any evidence that the business benefited from the marriage, from the shared financial resources, that would complicate matters." I swallowed hard. I need to know that I have options. I need to know that I can protect what's mine. "You do," Bernard said firmly. "But we need to be careful. If you decide to divorce him, you'll need proof of any wrongdoing, any betrayal, anything that will give you an edge. Have you seen anything that could help?" I hesitated. The memory of Robert and Melissa laughing together in his office, standing too close, the affection in their voices, it was burned into my mind. But proof? Real, concrete proof? "Not yet," I said, my voice shaky. "But I can get it. I will." Bernard nodded slowly. "We'll take this step by step. First, we'll keep things quiet. We won't tell Robert about the legal status of the sale just yet. Second, we'll gather all the evidence we can, photos, texts, anything that will give us leverage. And third, we need to move quickly. Robert might try to hide assets or move money around. We need to be prepared. I felt a chill settle over me. How fast can we move? Bernard's eyes met mine, filled with understanding. How soon can you get proof of the affair? I thought about the look on Robert's face when I confronted him. I thought about Melissa's quick exit, about the strange looks Ashley had given me earlier. 2 weeks, I said, determination settling over me like a shield. I'll get the proof. As I left Bernard's office, I felt like a different woman. The weight of the betrayal was still heavy on my chest, but now I had a plan. I wasn't going to let Robert's lies define me. I was going to take control of this situation, protect what was mine, and rebuild my life. But first, I had to uncover the truth. And I would. I would do whatever it took. The next 2 weeks were a blur of careful planning and quiet observation. I had become someone I never thought I'd be, a woman on a mission, taking steps I never imagined taking. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing the chaos of my emotions with the clarity of my purpose. Every moment was a calculation, a step towards securing my future, my independence. Robert had shown me who he really was, and now it was my turn to show him who I could become. I had no intention of confronting him yet. Instead, I began gathering pieces of the puzzle, carefully collecting the proof I needed to build my case. I started with the small things, subtle observations, little inconsistencies, and the people who might be able to shed light on Robert's affair. The first person I reached out to was Ashley, the receptionist at Robert's firm. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from the office where no one could overhear us. I ordered an iced tea, though I had no real appetite, and watched as Ashley nervously stirred hers, her eyes darting around the room. Ashley, I began, trying to sound calm, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. You don't have to be afraid. I'm not angry with you. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers twitching nervously around her glass. Then, as if the words had been weighing on her for too long, she let out a soft sigh. Everyone knows, Mrs. Miller. They've been together for years. Everyone at the office. I'm sorry you didn't know. My chest tightened, the realization sinking in that my suspicions had been right all along. How long? I asked quietly. 3 years, Ashley whispered. They go out together. They take lunch breaks, and last Christmas party I saw them. Robert and Melissa. Everyone saw. We thought you knew. She looked down at the table, her hands trembling as she stirred the tea. I felt my world tilt, as if everything I thought I knew had suddenly been turned upside down. 3 years. The same amount of time that Robert had confessed to. The same time period I had failed to notice, too busy with my own work to see the cracks in our marriage. Thank you, Ashley, I said, my voice steady, but my mind racing. I appreciate your honesty. I paid the bill and left the cafe, feeling the weight of the truth settling over me. But it wasn't enough yet. I needed more, something concrete, something that could stand up in court. The next day, I hired a private investigator, Marcus Webb, a retired police detective recommended by Bernard. Marcus was gruff but professional, and when I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. I've been doing this for 20 years, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. You're not paranoid, Mrs. Miller. You're being smart. I'll get you what you need. Marcus gave me a small recorder to keep with me, an audio device that would allow me to gather any incriminating evidence if Robert said anything that could help my case. He also started following Robert and Melissa, tailing them wherever they went. Over the next week, Marcus gathered damning evidence. Photographs of Robert and Melissa entering a rented condo in Mount Pleasant. Credit card receipts from romantic dinners at high-end restaurants, places I had never been with Robert. Hotel bookings from trips that had never included me. Texts between Robert and Melissa, talking about weekend getaways and future plans. But it was the video footage that would seal the deal. Marcus had captured them in a parking lot, kissing. Robert's hand on Melissa's face in a way that made my stomach churn, because it reminded me of the way he used to touch me, before everything changed. I didn't want to see the footage. I didn't want to relive the moments that had once been mine. But I needed to know the truth, every ugly detail. And so I watched it. The anger and betrayal flooded over me in waves, but so did something else, a quiet determination. This was not going to be swept under the rug. Not this time. While Marcus was gathering evidence, I began investigating our finances. Robert had always handled the money. I had trusted him, assuming that we were working together as a team. But now I saw things differently. I started going through our joint accounts, the credit card statements, and bank records, digging through years of transactions that I had ignored in the name of trust. It didn't take long to find the irregularities. There were large cash withdrawals from our accounts, money that seemed to disappear with no explanation. Purchases from furniture stores and jewelry shops that never resulted in anything showing up in our home. A credit card with charges for hotel stays and dinners in cities I had never visited. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. Robert had been living a double life. The proof was right in front of me. On day 12, Robert came home early. I was in the kitchen, making dinner like I had for the past 37 years. The routine was comforting, but it felt different now. I was different now. "Dorothy, we need to talk," Robert said, his voice clipped, his presence looming behind me. I turned to face him, my heart racing. "About what?" asked, keeping my voice even. "The money from the sale," he said, his tone condescending. "I've been thinking, and I really should be involved in the investment decisions. It's a lot of money, and you've never had to manage that kind of sum before. I could set up a meeting with our financial advisor. Well, mine technically, but he could help both of us." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "You want to control the money," I said, turning to face him fully. "Not manage it. Control it." He sighed, clearly frustrated. "Dorothy, I know you're still upset about what happened at the office with Melissa. But that's not important right now. What's important is that we handle this money wisely. It's a marital asset, and as your husband, I have a right to be involved in this." I felt a surge of anger, but I pushed it down. "Actually, Robert, it's not a marital asset. The business was mine before we got married. I started it with my own money, and I ran it myself. Legally, it's my separate property. You have no claim to it." He blinked, his face paling. "What are you talking about? You've been talking to a lawyer?" "I have," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "And I'm filing for divorce. I have evidence, Robert. Evidence of your affair. Photographs, videos, credit card receipts, witness statements. I've been documenting everything. And it's all going to come out. You can contest it, but it's going to get ugly. Uglier than it needs to be." His face turned red. "You're making a huge mistake. You can't just throw away 37 years of marriage over one mistake." 3 years. I corrected him quietly. "Not one mistake. 3 years of lies." I turned away from him, walking out of the kitchen without looking back. I wasn't sure what was worse, the betrayal or the fact that he still believed he could manipulate me. But I had no time for his games anymore. I had a life to rebuild. The divorce proceedings were as ugly as Bernard had warned. Robert hired an aggressive attorney who tried every angle. They claimed the business had benefited from Robert's emotional support, that his career had allowed me to focus on growing my business. They even tried to argue that his accounting expertise had helped structure the deals. But none of it mattered. I had the evidence. We presented everything in court, the photographs, the texts, the credit card records. We had everything we needed. And Robert, for all his bluster, knew he was losing. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. In the end, we reached a settlement. Robert kept his retirement accounts, his interests in the firm, and we split the house. But I walked away with the $45 million. It was my business, my money, my future. The divorce was final. Robert was no longer the man I had spent 37 years with. But I was free. And for the first time in my life, I was living on my own terms. The days following the divorce felt like a blur, as though my life had been divided into 2 distinct chapters, the years I spent with Robert and the years that awaited me now. I had spent decades supporting him, holding everything together, and believing in our shared dreams. But now, those dreams had shifted. The weight of the betrayal was heavy, but the relief of walking away from it was even more overwhelming. I spent the first few weeks after the divorce in a daze. My world turned upside down. I was no longer Mrs. Robert Miller. I was Dorothy. Just Dorothy. I had to learn how to navigate life again, without the comfort of routine, without the quiet complacency that had defined so much of my marriage. The money, the $45 million, had been a practical lifeline, but it wasn't a cure-all. It was security, yes, but the real work was internal. How would I fill the space that Robert had occupied for all those years? How would I rebuild myself after everything that had happened? I started with small steps, getting out of the house more, reconnecting with old friends, and allowing myself to enjoy the freedom I hadn't experienced in decades. I traveled, taking a short trip to the coast of South Carolina to clear my head. I went to museums, I read books, and for the first time in a long time, I did things just for me. And then I started focusing on the business side of my newfound wealth. I hired a new financial advisor, Patricia, a woman who specialized in helping women who had experienced sudden financial independence. I knew I needed someone who understood my position, someone who would help me protect my future and use the wealth I had gained wisely. Patricia and I met frequently, mapping out a plan for how to invest the $45 million. The first $20 million went into conservative investments, bonds, index funds, real estate investment trusts, things that would grow steadily over time. Another $10 million went into the creation of the Second Chances Foundation, a nonprofit I had always dreamed of. The foundation's mission was simple but powerful, to help women entrepreneurs get a start in business. I worked closely with Christina, my daughter, to establish and run the foundation. She had always shown an interest in business development, and together, we poured our energy into making the foundation a success. The rest of the money went into more personal investments, things I had dreamed of doing but had never had the time or freedom to pursue. I purchased the villa in Tuscany that Robert and I had talked about for years. But I didn't rent it. I bought it. A small, charming stone house with a garden overlooking the hills of Tuscany. It was my sanctuary, a place to breathe, to reflect, and to enjoy the life that I had fought so hard to create. I spent 6 months learning to speak Italian and making wine with the locals. It was a life I had never imagined for myself, but it felt like the right one. I wasn't just living, I was thriving. And then there was the cruise. Not the one we had planned in our retirement dreams, but something far more spontaneous. I didn't take a regular cruise ship. Instead, I chartered a small yacht with a captain and crew. I invited Christina and her family to join me. We spent 3 weeks sailing through the Greek islands, visiting tiny villages with no names on maps, eating fresh fish, and swimming in crystal-clear waters. It was perfect, a far cry from the life I had once known, but perfect in its simplicity and freedom. I paid off Christina's medical school loans and set up trust funds for my grandchildren, but not the kind that would make them lazy. The kind that would help them build their own futures. Education, seed money for businesses, a foundation to start their own paths in life. And then I started dating. I wasn't looking for another husband. I had had one of those, and look how that turned out. But I was open to companionship. I began going on dates with retired professors, artists, and even a very charming Italian man named Enzo, who owned a bakery in Florence. None of them were serious relationships, but I didn't need that. I just wanted to enjoy the company of interesting people, to laugh, to share stories, and to remind myself that life still had much to offer. 2 years passed, and I felt like a new woman, strong, independent, and free from the weight of Robert's betrayal. Christina and I had grown closer, and she had become a vital part of my foundation. My grandchildren, too, were growing up, and I was able to provide them with the kind of opportunities one had always dreamed of giving them. But I hadn't expected what happened next. It was 2 years after the divorce, and I was back in Charleston for Christina's birthday. We were having dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown, a place I had never dared to go when I was married to Robert because he always said it was too expensive. The meal was decadent, the wine was perfect, and I was basking in the warmth of family when I saw him. Robert. He was sitting at a table across the room, looking older, thinner, and far less self-assured than I remembered. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, younger than him, but not as young as Melissa. They were holding hands across the table, their heads close together as they whispered to each other. I couldn't help but stare for a moment. When our eyes met, Robert stood up awkwardly. "Dorothy," he said, his voice faltering. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied calmly, my voice steady. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a mild curiosity about the woman he was with. "This is Karen," he said, gesturing to the woman at the table. "Karen, this is Dorothy, my ex-wife." Karen looked uncomfortable, but I felt a strange sympathy for her. She had no idea what she was getting into. "Nice to meet you," I said politely. "I hope you're well, Robert." I turned and walked away before he could say anything more. Christina was waiting for me outside, and when I reached her, she looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "That was gracious of you," she said. I would have thrown my drink at him. I smiled softly. I thought about it, but the wine was too good to waste. We laughed together as we walked to the car. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Free from Robert, free from the past, and free to live life on my own terms. That night, as I lay in bed in my small apartment overlooking the harbor, I thought about everything I had been through. The betrayal, the divorce, the money, the new life I had built. Some people might say I had been lucky, that the timing of the business sale made everything easier. But I knew better. Luck had nothing to do with it. I had worked for 40 years to build something of value. I had made smart choices, even when they were difficult. I had trusted my instincts when things didn't feel right. And when my world fell apart, I picked up the pieces and rebuilt something new. That wasn't luck. That was life. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the future. There were still so many things I wanted to do, new projects, new adventures. I was just getting started. And for the first time in years, I was excited about what lay ahead. The next day, Patricia had mentioned a photography tour through New Zealand. 6 weeks of small group professional instruction. I had always wanted to learn photography, and now I had the time to do it. At 63 years old, I had all the time in the world. And for the first time, I realized that my future was wide open. It was mine to create, and nothing could hold me back. Life after the divorce had proven to be far more fulfilling than I could have imagined. The void left by Robert's betrayal had been replaced by a profound sense of freedom, a freedom I had never allowed myself to feel in the years of our marriage. It wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own decisions, my own dreams. I was finally living for myself. As I settled into this new chapter, I found myself diving deeper into the things I had always wanted to explore but had never had the time or space for. The villa in Tuscany was a sanctuary, but it was also a symbol of my newfound independence. Every corner of the villa, every vineyard I visited, every local I met reminded me of how far I had come. There was a joy in the simplicity of it all. I was learning a new language, creating new memories, and finally embracing the person I was meant to be, without guilt, without compromise. Christina had become more than just my daughter. She had become my closest confidant and partner in the Second Chances Foundation. Watching her take charge of the foundation with such passion and determination filled me with pride. It was clear to me that the money I had set aside wasn't just for me. It was for us, for the future of women entrepreneurs who needed the support and resources to build their own paths. Christina had a gift for business, and I was honored to be a part of her journey. But even with all the exciting projects, travels, and growth, I had moments of reflection. What had Robert's presence in my life truly meant? For 37 years, I had built my world around him, and while the betrayal had shattered the foundation we had once shared, I had come to realize that I was stronger because of it. I had been pushed to my limits and forced to rebuild. And in doing so, I had discovered a depth of strength I had never known existed. As I continued to move forward, I made sure to stay true to the lessons I had learned. Trusting my instincts was key, and I had learned to listen to my heart, no matter how hard the truth was to face. I had learned that I was worthy of love and respect, not only from others but from myself. And, above all, I learned that I could thrive alone. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden of my villa, sipping wine and reflecting on the past 2 years, I received an unexpected email. It was from Patricia, my financial advisor, who had been helping me manage my wealth. The subject line simply read, "Opportunity." I opened it curious. "Dorothy," the email began, "I've been thinking about something that might interest you. There is a business venture I think you should consider. It's an international women's empowerment project focused on financial independence for women. It's in the early stages, but I believe it aligns perfectly with your values and the work you've been doing with your foundation. If you're open to it, I'd love to discuss this further." I sat back, pondering the idea. At first, I hadn't considered venturing into business again. My goal had been to enjoy life and give back. But this felt different. Empowering women financially, helping them build the kind of independence I had worked so hard to create for myself, felt like the perfect next step. I hadn't thought about it, but maybe there was more I could do. Maybe this was my opportunity to truly make a difference. I emailed Patricia back, agreeing to meet. We arranged a meeting at a cafe in Florence. The excitement of possibility buzzed in my chest as I thought about what I could do with my resources, more than just a foundation, more than just a passive benefactor. I could actively participate in this world-changing project, giving women the tools they needed to build businesses and secure financial freedom. The meeting with Patricia was everything I had hoped for. She explained the project in more detail, and I could immediately see its potential. It was a collaboration between women entrepreneurs, investors, and educators, designed to provide mentorship, funding, and guidance for women who had dreams but lacked the resources to bring them to life. Patricia had been working behind the scenes, connecting with potential investors and partners, but the project needed someone with experience and a proven track record to lead the way. It was the challenge I had been waiting for. The business world was vast, and my experience running my own company had given me the skills and knowledge to guide others. More importantly, this was my chance to be part of something much bigger than myself. A chance to leave a lasting impact on the world and empower others to achieve what I had accomplished. It was a chance to pass on the knowledge and strength I had gained over the years to those who needed it most. I agreed to invest in the project, using a portion of my wealth to help it take shape. Over the next few months, I worked alongside Patricia and a team of passionate individuals to bring the project to life. It was a lot of work, but it was the kind of work that filled me with purpose. We connected with women from all over the world, hearing their stories and helping them build businesses that could change their lives and the lives of others. As I immersed myself in the project, I found that the more I gave, the more I received. I watched women take risks, face their fears, and build businesses that not only changed their own futures, but impacted their communities. The work was fulfilling in ways I had never anticipated. I wasn't just living for myself anymore. I was part of a global movement, creating opportunities and changing the world one woman at a time. A year later, as I stood on the stage at an International Women's Summit, speaking to a room full of entrepreneurs and activists, I realized just how far I had come. The woman who had once been betrayed, who had spent years building someone else's dream, was now standing tall, leading others to do the same. Robert had once been the center of my world, but now I realized the world was much bigger than him. I had the power to shape my own future, and in doing so, I was helping others do the same. My life was no longer defined by betrayal or loss. It was defined by the strength to move forward, by the freedom to create, and by the ability to help others find their own path. As I looked out over the crowd, I smiled. This was the life I had built for myself. This was the life I had earned. And it was just the beginning.